Hello, welcome back to the Red Devils Den podcast. It's a podcast to talk all things Manchester United. And of course, sort of in the last 5 days or so since the Burnley game, things have been really hectic in terms of the Super League. Obviously, it's been sort of proved that football is still nothing without the fans, and that's brilliant news. So first of all, United Surgeon, what are your sort of thoughts on what has happened since we last did a podcast? Obviously, we talked about that back then, but a lot has happened since.
Yeah, so just a quick summary of where things stand. Obviously, the reaction was bad. Everyone's seen it. The Chelsea fans protested outside the ground. Glazers out, Kroenke out was trending, FSG out, and eventually the owners gave in. It started with Chelsea and Man City withdrawing. Depending on the reports, one of them went first, the other quickly followed. And then the rest of the English teams pulled out under pressure from the UK government. Immediately after that, Inter Milan was the next, and Atletico Madrid were the next dominoes to fall. And then Milan and Juventus said, well, it's not viable with four teams left in it. So they kind of backed down over the last 2 days. There have been interviews with Florentino Perez and Juan Laporta, the presidents at Madrid and Barca, who have both said that they want to keep the project going somehow. So those are kind of the two sides that haven't given up on it yet. But it does appear to be dead as far as our club is concerned, and that's fantastic news because ultimately, as we said on the last podcast, a closed system without meritocracy is not what we love about this game, and a United team that only competes in a closed Super League is not the club that we fell in love with. So I'm just glad to see that it's all over and that's dead. Obviously, it's important now to have further accountability. Ed Woodward is gone, but it's important now that we do everything we can to make sure that the Glazers leave or at least decrease their active involvement if they can't find a buyer. If the government could look into schemes like 50+1 or having fan representation on boards, whatever is realistic. There's definitely a need for further change, and the UEFA Champions League reform needs some tweaking as well. There have been reports that the 2 spots for kind of high UEFA coefficient teams that miss out. So basically the safety net spots for a team like Chelsea or Liverpool, if they finished 5th or 6th, those spots might be stripped out of the new Champions League format. And I think that would be a huge improvement. So while the war isn't won yet, the battle is definitely going in our favor. And it's just great to see as a fan that fans around the world have this great power.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree. So obviously there's a bit of a naming issue because both Daniels and one Daniel has changed his Twitter username. So Daniel Winkle will call you Daniel, and the other Daniel will call Dan. So Daniel.
I think you've got that backwards, Reese. Just going off.
Yeah. Okay, so
I didn't know Daniel, mate.
Okay, you're Daniel. You're Daniel. What are your thoughts on what's sort of happened since the last podcast and the collapse of the Super League?
There's so much to unpack, but power to the fucking people. Do you know what I mean? It's insane what we did. We took down this $7 billion fucking conglomerate that was going on. It's totally insane. And the 48 hours in which it was a thing. All of social media was all coming together, and it was a fantastic thing to see. That was really inspiring for me because it just, and then obviously from that, we're now on like several of the movements. Like we want the Champions League changed. We're really going after the Glazers now because it's probably the best time that we can do it. So, I mean, it's sort of sparked something in everybody, and it's really good to see. So obviously we all know it was a terrible thing. I mean, you saw the last podcast, we were distraught, but at the same time, it's inspired something in everybody, and things are happening and things are changing, and all these things are being brought forward. So from certain aspects, you can sort of look at it as a good thing because obviously the sort of Glazer ownership's been bubbling for years and years and years. But as sort of Gary Neville said on Sky Sports the other day, no one liked them, but you can still go see United play. They're still in the competitions which value meritocracy. So you can sort of live with it a bit. And I was very much like that. I mean, I've always sort of had that mindset, So, yeah, obviously it's been bubbling for a while, but, this just sort of brought everything to a head. And, the bubble sort of burst, like United fans really lost their patience. and now things are happening, things are changing, and we've discovered that, you know, we do have a voice in things like that, and we can change things. So I'm so excited to see where this goes. You know, I really am.
Yeah, definitely. I think the future is going to be really interesting. So in terms of sort of what goes on, Vin, what are your thoughts on what has happened in the last sort of week or so?
Yeah, it's been quite a whirlwind week so far, and it's just Friday. I mean, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday was just like unbelievable, and fallout of the Super League, the announcement itself, and then the protests that happened outside Leeds, outside then Chelsea fans before their games. Peter Cech coming out and trying to calm them down, and I think the quote that he said in front of fans, he said, "I know, give everybody time." And I think that sort of sparked a bit of hope amongst all of us as to say, okay, we have someone who sort of understands what the situation is, and maybe there's a chance, there's a window of hope that there could be a domino fall beginning anytime soon, and that's exactly what happened. Chelsea followed, Man City and Chelsea almost side by side at the same time sort of backed out, and then you had all the other teams falling like 9 pins. But despite, and again, just when we thought it was over, you have Florentino Perez, who, like a madman, goes on these interviews and says, "Oh, it's not over. They're very much in this. You can't back out of contracts like that. It's very binding." And started calling us legacy fans, calling us not so young people who didn't watch football. And I'm like, I'm 24, mate. I mean, you mentioned 16 to 24 years old. I'm 24, and I'm sure a bunch of us, I'm sure quite a few of us are in that age range. And I'm like, yeah, but we still watch football. We still love Manchester United. We still love the domestic competitions.
90% of football Twitter is 16 to 24-year-olds, just to drop that in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 18 and I don't know what I'd
Exactly.
do without Man United. I mean, it's the only thing I look forward to all week. So
I think the last time I checked, our audience is over 60% in that 18 to 24 bracket. And clearly we care about football and care about these matches. So it's just incredibly surprising to hear him say something like that. But I think it isn't surprising when you look at everything else that he said. He said he wanted to shorten the matches. After it collapsed, there was that comment of how the English owners weren't in it for money. They were in it for love of sport. There was all sorts of ridiculous commentary coming out of his mouth. In one sentence, he said that there wouldn't be any big transfers. And when the host asked him, so no Mbappe then for Madrid this summer? He said, well, I didn't say that. And then he says Madrid don't have any money, signs David Alaba the same day. It's just, Florentino Perez is senile. There's no other way to put it. The man has completely lost his mind.
Yeah, it was an absolute clusterfuck, that. And I was just watching an interview. Yesterday with Sid Lowe, who is a journalist for ESPN, but who reports for Spanish football for La Liga and for Real Madrid and Barcelona. And he was saying that the show where he did the second interview is not very well known in Spain. It's like a tacky late night show. And that just got me thinking, if you want to promote something as big as the Super League, why would you not go to like the big Spanish TVs? Why won't you let the top journalists interview you about that? Why are you going to these second-rate tacky shows and sort of promoting Super League there? If you think it is that genuine, and if you think it will save football, then why not sort of promote it on a global level? Why not go to the top media houses and sort of promote it?
So as far as promoting it, I can't remember. I think it might have been The Athletic where I read this, but they basically said that they had asked John Henry to be the face of it, the Liverpool chairman, and he basically told them to go to hell, that he didn't want to do it. And, essentially, it appears as though all of the owners were not interested in being the face of this, except for Perez, who decided to go for it primarily because in Spain, the smaller media outlets are afraid of him. he basically can control the narrative there. And so the reason why he went for El Chiringuito and El Aguero, or El Aguero, I don't know how you say that.
El Aguero, yeah.
El Aguero. The reason he went for those outlets is because he can bully them and have them ask the questions that he wants rather than be asked tough questions and put on the spot. Like, he made statements that 14 of the Premier League teams were making money and the big six were losing the money, which is not accurate at all, obviously, in English football. And then he's just making ridiculous claims and no one challenges him on those because in Spain they're afraid of him. There was actually a piece in The Athletic today, or sorry, it was in Politico Europe, that the statements that were coming out of the various governments, they say that the reason why Pedro Sanchez, who's the prime minister of Spain, spoke so late and gave such a weak statement is evidently he's afraid of Perez, and Perez's lobbyists are that strong in Spain. So you have to realize that this guy is so entrenched, and the reason why he goes to these outlets is because he's able to control the narrative in a way that you can't in England.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense now, and that just goes to show how powerful Perez kind of is, his stature in Spain and in Europe in general. And what was great to see, the positives out of all of this, was the fact that everyone, all fans sort of united together and came out and protested vociferously. And rivalries, banter, enemies aside, everyone realized that this was going to be the death of English football in a way. And they got together and they protested, made their voices heard. And yeah, I would like to believe that us protesting was one of the big reasons why it happened, despite what many others might say, oh, it's nothing, UEFA offered the clubs more money and that's how they backed them out, which might be the case. And look, we all know UEFA and FIFA aren't saints either. They have their own falsities, they have their own areas of corruption, which we need to work on, like the new Champions League format. I was just looking at an explanation video yesterday, and yeah, I mean, it's not great either. Especially the extra 4 spots, 2 of which go to sort of legacy teams, which I believe UEFA are thinking of scrapping it out, but I hope they do that. But yeah, I mean, that's no great either. We need to work on those reforms, but this was the bigger monster of the other two, and you can't fight all your battles simultaneously. You need to pick your battles, prioritize them. Like I said, this is a big war. This is a big, long war in football, and there are multiple battles which we need to fight. This was the biggest of them. Now we can fight the other ones. For example, starting with Glazers out, and then you move on to UEFA and then FIFA, and then try to root all of them out.
One of the reasons why it was so important that UEFA did those spots initially was because these clubs, the Dirty Dozen, were threatening to create a Super League if they weren't given an expanded Champions League, if they weren't given those back doors in. So UEFA put them in. Now that they've played their hand and it's backfired on them, UEFA has a lot more power to reverse that. And that's why there's so much pressure within the organization now to say, okay, let's take those spots back out of the Champions League. So I think we'll see some movement on that. And I know that Reese is probably going to go to someone else next. But before we do that, I just wanted to go ahead and give you the exact words on Perez so that I'm not kind of giving anyone the wrong impression. The words from Politico Europe was, but as the high-level political pressure was growing, one voice was notably silent, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. Football Insider said Spain's marquee teams, Real Madrid and Barcelona, may have had the most to gain from the Super League. As the behind-the-scenes jostling continued on Monday afternoon, there was speculation among multiple football officials that the hugely powerful Real Madrid had cowed Sanchez into silence. And the fact that they cowed the prime minister of their country into silence really says everything about Florentino Perez and the operation he runs.
Just quickly on the UEFA thing, with now they're considering taking the spots out. They've backed all these protests against the Super League. So if they were to sit there and not listen to similar protests against their new Champions League, that's the hypocrisy of the highest level. So if you're going to back protests against the Super League, you then absolutely have to listen to fans of their competitions. Just a quick note.
I think one of the things we'll see is the spots probably will go, and that'll help improve the Champions League dramatically. But I don't expect a return to the group format that a lot of us love so much. the main reason for that is I think UEFA and the Premier League, pretty much all the fundamental stakeholders involved do agree that the top teams do need to play more often and have more European matches per season. And you can't do that in groups because once you seed them, you only have a set number of teams per group that you can play against. So the reason why they're going to this one league, 136 team league format with you playing 10 games based on seeding has to do with increasing the frequency of matches among the big sides. And you can't do that even if you made, let's say, 3 groups of 12 or something. So I do expect that we'll see something similar to these kind of large groups rather than the current 4-group format, or 14 group format. But I do think those 2 Champions League spots, the legacy spots, probably will go, and that'll be a massive victory for the fans.
Just to quickly just ask on this, do we know how the seedings are going to be matched? Is it going to be like top versus bottom, or
No, not yet.
It's all very confusing, isn't it? I mean, when is this new sort of Champions League format going to go ahead? Like, it was 2024,
I think.
24-25 season.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Dano hasn't gone yet. That's United Dynamo FC. What are your sort of thoughts on what's happened lately with the Super League?
I think it's just a real statement of what football fans can achieve when they come together. I don't think as a collective we kind of realised what we could do, because everyone's always driven by their own teams and their own focus, whereas this is really the first time where we all came together for something. And now where people have realised, well, hang on a minute, if we all come together, we can actually make a difference. And I think that's why we've now moved on to the focus of the UEFA historical places, rather than just thinking we've beat the Super League, it's over with. Like, people have realised we can actually change things, and I think that's a big step forward that we didn't have before. The kind of attitude was it's such big organisations, you can't change anything. But now we have concrete proof that if you all work together, you can achieve something, and I think that's a big mindset change.
Yeah, 100%. What were your thoughts on how sort of the players, the manager, how they reacted to the Super League, like on social media, press conferences, etc.?
I think it's kind of as expected that we know for a fact that they weren't aware of it until we became aware of it. They found out about it at the same time. But I fully expected them to be against it as well, because it's just that most of them understand that this is not football, this is not how it works. So they were always going to be against it. And I think the managers in particular, like Pep and Ole today, both did really good jobs of speaking against it. They explained exactly why that sport without the prospect of losing isn't sport. So yeah, they kind of became a voice for our thoughts really well.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously there was some sort of rumours with the protest that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had actually said that I didn't really want to give this sort of a platform, but we're gonna go in, and that's the plan. That he'd actually said that Joel Glazer loves the club. So United vs. what were your thoughts on that report?
On what report? Sorry, I got distracted. There's breaking news that Ryan Giggs has been charged with causing actual bodily harm to a woman in her 30s and common assault of a woman in her 20s relating to an incident on the evening of Sunday, 1st November 2020. So I was just reading Simon Stone's tweet. I apologize. We can get into that on a future podcast maybe, but can you repeat the question?
So in terms of the report that Ole said to the fans that Joel Glazer loves the club, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that Ole it's probably been played up a little bit. I think Ole probably said something along the lines of, the owners have been very good with me, or Sir Alex used to say things like that they've never denied me a player that I've asked for, something along those lines. I don't expect that Ole actually used the words that Joel Glazer loves the club. But even if he did, ultimately, he's the manager and they're the owners, and you don't badmouth somebody you work for. You don't have to go out of your way to suck up to them, but at the same time, you're not going, like, the people who are listening to this are not going to go into work tomorrow morning and just say to their boss, hey, you're an idiot and you hate this organization. It's just no one realistically is going to do that. So I think all these comments on the Super League were more important than his comments on Joel Glazer specifically, because he's not going to come out and say Glazer's out and peel off his shirt and have a green and gold body paint underneath. It's just not going to happen. People who are expecting that really need to grow up, honestly.
Go on, United MFC, you had something to say?
So I think the notion that he said it was completely ridiculous, because if you think about it from a logical perspective, if a bunch of people turn up at the ground protesting against the Glazers, and then Ollie comes out and says Joel Glazer loves the club, the report that they peacefully left the ground after speaking with him is not going to happen. If someone comes out and says the exact opposite to what you want them to say, they're not going to leave. And then today, even in the press conference, when Ollie was asked about it, he didn't say anything like that. He really stressed that they have a working relationship. He didn't comment. He didn't say anything positive about them as a person or anything like that, or anything. All he talked about was the fact that they had a good working relationship. And so I don't think there's any way he did say it. I think when you look at the situation, I think someone's made up lies to try and make Ollie look bad. His comments today completely throw out the notion of what he allegedly said.
Another point that we should make, and that I forgot to make earlier, is that I think the report that Ollie said that Joel Glazer loves the club came from Red Issue. And it's important to remember that Red Issue 2 days ago called Sir Alex Ferguson a dog in a tweet. This is a reprehensible organization that doesn't have the interest of the club or the fans at heart. I know that they once upon a time sold fanzines at the ground, and people have fond memories of that, but the current leadership of that group is pretty much as bad or worse than the Glazers in many ways. And it's important to remember that sources matter, and that scum like this shouldn't be given credence or any reputability among United fans. Just ignore everything they say and block them is what I'd suggest.
I mean, I'd only heard of Red Issue when they came out with that news, and I was thinking, I've never even heard of them. I've been on Twitter for, a year. So, the fact that I haven't really heard of them, and people were believing them. So it was quite confusing to me. Yeah, Vin, did you have any thoughts on that report? Or
Yeah, I didn't believe those quotes really. I wasn't gonna believe anything that was tweeted regarding the protest, simply because there is no proof of it. There is what we do know is that a bunch of protesters did go on to Carrington and did try to raise their voice, bring out those banners. But regarding their interaction with Solskjaer, with Fletcher, and with Matic, there's no way of knowing what was actually said. And so anyone who comes out with a tweet is obviously going to be under suspect. It's going to be under purview. And yeah, I don't think Solskjaer came out and said Joel Glazer loves the club. I don't think that was what the exchange was. And like Resurgent said, Red Issue is a controversial account, is a controversial figure for the comment that he made on Sir Alex Ferguson. And I think it's highly recommended that everyone not follow what everything's being said around, because there are a lot of things that can be said without any proof, and everyone just starts to believe it. And so it's important to sort of it's important to sort of do your research and have a fact check, ask them for proof if there's any, and just believe carefully what you're reading.
I think it's important to note that Red Issue is beyond controversial. There are things that they tweet out that no United fan can support. Among fans, we have disagreements about who's a good player or not. We can disagree about the legacy of Ryan Giggs, for example, in light of some of the accusations against him in recent times. You can argue whether or not Gerrard, Scholes, or Lampard was the best England midfielder of their generation. And whatever your opinions are, those are all valid debates. But there are two figures in the history of this club, Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson, that if you go after them, then you're not a United fan at that point. You've become something else. You've given in to the hate to an extent that you no longer belong to the fan family you don't belong to the supporters of Manchester United. You're no longer among us. You're not one of us. And I think it's important to realize that with Red Issue at this point.
Yeah, no doubt about that at all. So obviously, a couple of days ago, when the sort of Super League was in the middle of collapsing, there was news about Ed Woodward actually resigning from the club, and then the official statement came out. They'll be resigning at the end of 2021. So Dan, and that is the one we can see your face. Your mic's unmuted, so make sure to unmute yourself. What were your
So
thoughts
just
on
put my glasses down if you like.
Yeah.
What was the question? Sorry, I missed it.
Ed Woodward resigning. What do you think about
that? I think it's something that we all wanted for years and years and years, and he's, I think he's sort of been the fall guy for the whole thing. And Gary Lineker, people like that have come out defending him, and he's obviously, got all his PR saying that he believes in the English football pyramid. Of course, he fucking doesn't. We've had sources saying that he was one of the chief architects behind the whole thing, and he's obviously felt the heat so much that it's forced him to leave. I mean, we know that he was leaving anyway. So part of me sort of, the conspiracy theorist part of me thinks that have the Glazers forced him to announce this, whereas before that he was just going to sort of leave towards the end of the year. Have they put this out to so the fans feel like they've had a win, if you understand what I'm trying to say? But yeah, it's just something we've wanted for years and years and years. I mean, what does make me a bit nervous is obviously sometimes it's better the devil you know, but because obviously we know that Richard Arnold's probably most likely going to be his successor, and I personally know little to nothing about him apart from the fact that they've known each other for 30 years. And a lot of things coming out today saying he's basically going to be Ed V2. And the whole reason that we wanted Ed out is because we essentially wanted a football man in there. So that does make me a bit nervous about the whole thing. Obviously, we as fans have got a small win with him going. Obviously, we know the big fish is the Glazers, but it's going to be a lot harder to budge. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that anyway.
Just to really quickly touch on the controversial reports around Ed Woodward. If you look at Fabrizio Romano's podcast this week, at the beginning, Porzio asks him, hey, so there's reports that Woodward was going to leave the whole time and it's unrelated to the Super League. And then Fabrizio says that's not true. Similarly, you mentioned the word fall guy, which kind of brought this up in my mind. In an article in The Athletic today, they say here, sources say Woodward had been one of the key figures, and executive added, I don't think he's a fall guy because it was his idea. And then the Times has reported calling him one of the architects of the scheme. So Ed Woodward's PR machine can spin at 10,000 rotations per minute, but ultimately the fact of the matter is that he was a key figure involved in hatching the scheme. And even if he got cold feet before everybody else, that doesn't excuse him from it. And it's a great thing for the club that he's leaving. Just to give a little bit of my thoughts on it, I understand that the big fish is the Glazers, but the thing that always comes up in my mind is the Glazers have owned United for 2 periods. David Gill was the chief executive for one of them, and Ed Woodward for the last 8 years. And under David Gill, while there were financial limits placed upon the club, while we were servicing the debt, while there was a lot of limitations created by Glazer ownership, it was competently managed. And the result of that was United were not bad at making signings. United were a competitive side. United didn't make last-minute panic decisions. Under Ed Woodward's leadership, we did all of those things, and the club, obviously, it has not been nearly as successful. And obviously, a lot of the reason for that is we had lost the greatest manager of all time, concurrently with the changeover in the chief executive. But I think also it has to do with Ed Woodward just not being well-versed in the world of football. If you look at the reporting from The Athletic, it seems as though he's a rugby guy. He doesn't know a lot about the sport. He had to learn on the job. And just touching on what Dan said, the one name that I'm hoping to avoid as his replacement is Richard Arnold, because the article from The Athletic says that not only is Richard Arnold also a rugby guy, doesn't really know the sport, he's primarily involved in commercial deals. Richard Arnold also is evidently less personable than Ed Woodward. He's not as good at dealing with people. So just imagine Woodward, who's worse at his job and is new. And that's what Richard Arnold is. So there's a lot of good options out there. Edwin van der Sar, people have talked about Stuart Webber at Norwich City, even though he has a slightly different role there. There's all sorts of names out there that you could go for. But the one that we all need to hope and avoid is Richard Arnold.
Yeah, definitely. I think it has to be an external appointment, because the ones that are already at the club, really, they're all Ed Woodward's mates. I mean, they're just not going to have the right sort of effect on the club. I mean, if you look at Van der Sar from Ajax, he would be an ideal candidate, but I'm just not sure that's realistic. I mean, he said last year on joining Man United as the CEO or having some sort of role, that he wouldn't do it for at least another few years. You know, for the next few years, he's going to be at Ajax, so I don't think he's going to do it yet.
Even among internal appointments, there are better and worse ones, obviously. I think Richard Arnold is arguably the worst of the lot, alongside Matt Judge as a potential internal appointment. If we are to go the internal route, and I hope we don't, I hope it's external. But if we go internal, I would like it to be Cliff Batty, who's the current CFO at United. He knows the financial side well. He's had roles in the gambling and betting industry. He's been involved in areas that have dealt with football at least before, so he knows something about the sport. He's not completely new coming in. So while I'd prefer an external appointment, if we go internal, that would be the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I know we don't know too much about the guy from Norwich, or the other guy with it from Southampton, but United Dynamo, I'll just call you that for now. What are your sort of thoughts on the Woodward situation? Any ideas who could replace him?
I completely agree with the notion of essentially anyone but Richard Arnold. So I don't think, while I would love Van der Sar, I don't think it has to be him. I think there are other names we could go and get. Like the two you've mentioned, we've been linked with. One of them is arguably not quite the right fit because he's a sporting director, but the other one could be good, from Southampton. We have options, and I don't want the internal appointment. We need to go and get someone who is proven in this kind of role, knows what they're doing, and there are people out there who can do it. I think it's ridiculous, the report suggesting that Woodward is in charge with appointing his own successor. I don't think that should be down to him, but it looks like it is, and we're going to have to live with that and hope he makes the right decision. But we'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And then lastly, Vin, what are your thoughts on Woodward resigning?
Yeah, it's quite surprising to me, if I'm being honest. I didn't see that coming. There was another positive from all of this shambles that happened. Yeah, look, obviously Woodward was part of the problem. And contrary to what his friends in the media are saying, in Sun, The Telegraph, Sky coming out and saying, Woodward wasn't aware of the Super League plans until the announcement was made. Yeah, I think that's a load of bollocks. The Athletic, very right, has a lot of sources, a lot of articles in The Athletic. Laurie Whitwell has also come out and said that quite a few of the executives in other Premier League clubs have said that he was in it from day one. And his job sort of hinged on bringing the Super League to fruition. And the fact that it didn't happen means that he was inevitably getting the sack from the Glazers. And like a surgeon said, he was going to be the fall guy for everything, for if this whole thing fell out, which it did. And so in hindsight, it's not surprising, but when the announcement came out, I'm pretty sure all of us were expecting it. Woodward is, it's if you think about it, there are two ways to look at Ed Woodward, right? One is from the financial aspect, which he is good at. He when it comes to sort of running the finances, improving the revenue generation for Manchester United, he's done that successfully, being an investment banker. And so from a financial point of view, he has done a pretty good job. He's raised record revenues for the club. But then the other perspective is that he was also in charge of running the day-to-day footballing operations as well, which included having a say on transfers, contract negotiations, managerial appointments, and whatnot. And that's where he failed. And even though there might be some positives of Ed Woodward, such as the way he sort of led the club into the pandemic, protecting his players, staff, and other members, not ensuring that there were no furloughs, no layoffs whatsoever, not selling the naming rights to Old Trafford, maintaining some of the traditions of the club, like the Munich disaster, the tributes, and those things. And I think backing Solskjaer recently, I think he's sort of been calm, been patient with Solskjaer. He sort of kind of understands what he's trying to do, and so he's given him his support. So while there are sort of positives, but there are a lot of negatives as well, which sort of outweigh the very few positives that are there. And therefore, while he may not be the biggest root that is taken out of Old Trafford, he was certainly one of them. And like Guy Neville said very eloquently, what we've taken out is the trunk. Now we need to go for the roots. So very rightly so. Once Woodward's gone, now it's time for Glazers out. Got to keep the pressure going. Obviously, there are rumors that an owner might be putting this club up for sale. We just got to hope it's us.
On Woodward, I think I mentioned it last week as well. On Woodward and the Glazers, the heat has massively been off them. Recently it's massively been off them and everything they've been doing. We know that Ed Woodward is good what he does. We know that he's fantastic at financial deals and things like that. And obviously when he brought in John Mortar to run the football side, the heat was massively on them. We saw a project, and we know that he's protected Solskjaer. So they've just let themselves down. Everything's gone. Everything is gone, and the heat is firmly on them now.
Okay, so after all that talk on the Super League, we'll finally move on to actual football. So in terms of the Leeds match, which is coming up on Sunday, obviously big game against some arch rivals. Vin, what were your thoughts on the Leeds game coming up?
Yeah, well, Leeds United, an old rival of ours, back in the Premier League. First time we met them this season, we thrashed them, absolutely decimated them. And it's going to be another exciting game. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure there are going to be goals on both sides. And we'll come to the lineups in a bit. But Bielsa and Leeds, it's sort of been it's been portrayed as a romantic story. There's a documentary that's come out on it. And while it's a great journey, of course, I'm not going to lie, I did watch it. Did enjoy watching their experiences and their journeys, but at the end of it, they're rivals. Want them to lose, hate them, so bring on the Rose Derby.
Definitely. United down MFC. What do you think about it?
I'm looking forward to it. I think without going too overboard in the praise, I'm just talking about the style. The way they play is entertaining to watch, and but then from a United perspective, the way they play is quite suited to us. There's a strong argument that we're trying to be diplomatic. We're probably top 3 in the counter-attacking sides in Europe. We're that good at counter-attacking. We have more to our game as well, but I mean, just this Leeds game inherently lends itself to that. So I'm looking forward to it. I think we need to, without going too much into the selection side of things, I think we need to look at what we did last time, where we went with the hard-working players, because if you want to have success against Leeds, you have to outwork them. They work so hard on the pitch. And so, I think we need to do this similar to what we did last time.
Yeah, for sure. United Resurgent, what do you think about game on Sunday?
If you had asked me that question a month ago, I would have said that this is a match where United will walk away 4-1, 5-1 winner, something like that. But Leeds' last 2 results, beating Man City and then getting a draw against Liverpool, are obviously fantastic and show that Bielsa has tweaked his system slightly since the new year. They've become a little bit more defensively solid. And the side effect of that is I don't expect us to run up a score against them the way that we did last time. It's going to be a little bit more challenging, but they're still not a team that plays with a low block. They'll still come at us, and I think that suits us. So I do expect United to win, but don't expect it to be as comfortable as it was before. As far as, again, not getting too much in the team selection, but Roma is 4 days later. It's a European semifinal, whereas in the Premier League. We're more or less secure in second at this point. 72 points secures top four. So we need 2 more wins the rest of the way. That's going to happen, obviously. And then for second, we're currently, I think, 7 points ahead of Leicester, which is also, again, I don't think they'll be able to bridge that given how difficult their last 3 fixtures are. They face us, Chelsea, and Spurs. So I really don't think we're in trouble in the league. I think, and we're not going to catch Man City. Let's just let that dream die, guys. It's not going to happen. So bearing all that in mind, the league matches are more for pride at this point than they are for actual value. So I would kind of do everything as Ollie, kind of all my team selection, coaching, all of that would be with the idea that Roma is more important and I'd have one eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, when they played Man City and they had a man sent off before halftime, I thought they were going to get absolutely destroyed. I thought it was going to be 4-0, 5-0. Yeah, I thought they were going to get absolutely battered, but somehow they managed to stay in it. I really wasn't expecting that. So with 10 men, you'd think really against us, they'd with 11 men, they'd do all right. But as Dan and Rusty was saying, we do have sort of that style of counter-attacking that does suit playing against them. So then again, it could very much be like last time as well. But yeah, Dan, what were your thoughts on it?
I think we go into this game in a really, really strong position. We've won our last 5. Obviously, Leeds have not lost any of their last 5 either. And we've just had a week off as well. And as Resurgent was saying, the top 4 is pretty much secure. I think we're, pretty much nailed on to finish second as well. So, we've just had a week off, so the players should be fresh. It's first time all season, really. So we go into it in a really, really strong position. Really looking forward to it. I mean, admittedly, you have to admit that Leeds do play an excellent style of football. Whether or not they get tanked is always good to watch. So, let's hope for another 6-2 at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. So, Vin, do you think it's going to be the same as last time, or do you sort of think it's going to be a lot different with how they've sort of changed over the last few games in terms of their defensive structure?
Yeah, as Resurgent said, it's not going to be a thrashing. It's not going to be a 6-2, 5-1, that sort of scoreline. I think it'll be much more tighter. It'll be much more closer. One thing to keep in mind is, since we're playing at Elland Road, who have recently laid out a new pitch, and quite a lot of teams have found that to be quite slippery. There isn't enough grip. I'm not sure if they've worked on that ever since, but
I think what I read was they took that pitch somehow from Tottenham. They kind of bought that from them, and it's a secondhand pitch or something. So yeah, it's a pretty abysmal surface to play on.
Yeah, so I don't know if they've worked on that, but if they haven't, so that's something that might cause a factor, not just for us, but for them as well. And like like everyone said, Bielsa it seems that Bielsa has made some tweaks to his system. It's not the usual go all out and run on play at full throttle, full intensity. I think there is a bit of defensive structure. We saw that against Man City as well, where they somehow, despite being down to 10 men, they somehow pulled off a victory. And so yeah, it's going to be a lot more closer. We need to be much more careful. It's not going to be. I don't think it. I mean, although Bielsa did come out and say after the Leeds game, after our previous game, that we're going to play like we're going to always play like we play. It doesn't matter who the opposition is. We're going to go about the same manner. So while you can expect more or less the same from Leeds, I think there's going to be a bit more defensive structure which we need to be wary of.
Dan and Vince touched on this, but one thing that stood out to me with Leeds is the idea that they've changed not only their defensive structure, but their work rate is so good that they're able to compensate for losing a man. It almost reminds me that when Leicester won the league about 5-6 years ago, the saying was always they played 4-4-2, but N'Golo Kante counted as 2, so they effectively had a 3 in midfield. And I think with Leeds, the situation is they almost have an extra player in every kind of area of the pitch, just because they all work so hard. It gives them, it's like there's kind of 5 defenders and 4 midfielders rather than 4 and 3. So it's a very interesting system to watch, and hopefully we're able to diffuse it.
Just on the sort of more defensive structure that they've picked up, I also do want to give Bielsa a bit of praise for his periodization this season, because as we know, the famous term, the Bielsa burnout, because of how his teams play, you know, I mean, it's natural for players to pick up lots and lots of muscle injuries. So I think he definitely deserves some praise for because you know, we know that he's a bit set in his ways. He plays the way that he does. He mentioned that plenty of times, but I definitely think that he's sort of tweaked his either play style or his periodization regimes. And the players seem to be as fit as ever. And the work rate of these players is phenomenal, really, especially because they've just come up to the Premier League as well. So I definitely deserve Bielsa. I think Bielsa deserves praise for that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tough. So in terms of starting 11s, obviously, well, Ollie mentioned in his press conference, well, at the time of recording, it's today, that Rashford didn't actually train today. Well, it's Friday if anyone's watching in the future. Hello, people from the future. But he could be involved tomorrow. So, and also Bay is potentially back as well. So, I don't know what United Resurgence thoughts were on the lineup.
Yeah, so I think the fact that Marcus Rashford is in such a condition that he wasn't able to train today, I don't care tomorrow if he trains like the greatest athlete who ever lived. He shouldn't be involved in the starting 11 on Sunday for me. I think the semifinal with Roma is significantly more important, and Rashford should be rested for that. As far as team selection goes, I think the back 5 picks itself. You could argue maybe for Eric Bailly giving Victor Lindelof's back a rest, but we've had a week off already, so I really don't think it's necessary. I think I'd probably bring Bailly back in kind of as a substitute for Lindelof, and then kind of increase his minutes and then start him against Liverpool next week in between the 2 semifinals against Roma. So I would go with the usual back 5: Henderson, Wan-Bissaka, Lindelof, Maguire, Shaw, and then Dan mentioned that we should be a hard-working side, so McFred in front of that. But I'm curious to see what everyone else thinks of that defensive structure.
Just quickly on Bailly, this is a bit unrelated, but I just want to know something quickly. He was supposedly out with COVID. That's right, isn't it? But obviously, also around the time that he got injured as well, he massively fell out with Ollie. So I know that there was some things that were floating around about, you know, the actual fact that he was dropped from the side a bit, just as a sort of punishment for getting. I think it was his friend coming out saying he'll leave the club, he doesn't get more minutes. So I haven't seen anything floating around. I just wonder if you was, because I remember seeing that a while back that people were saying that he may have COVID, but he would have dropped him anyway because of the fact that they fell out.
I mean, obviously there was a fallout regarding over-contract negotiations with Bailly, but I don't think Ollie would. If Bailly is available, I don't think Ollie's just going to ostracize him just like that. I don't think that happens. If he is an option available to play, I think he will pick him regardless. Because we're heading into, again, we're going to play midweek, we're going to have 3 games a week. And so you do need to have as many options as possible. And you've got to put whatever that's happened off the pitch a bit aside, especially now that we're in the semi-final. So we need to focus on that. And if he's available, I think Ollie picks him.
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone saw any reports coming out about it or what happened.
Nothing recently.
A lot of rumors.
The only thing that came out was that Real Betis were unlikely to sort of go for him. There was this rumor recently that one of the Spanish sides in La Liga, I think was either Villarreal or Real Betis, might be interested in him. But now I think there's another report that's come out that said that it's unlikely, given the finances, they're not going to go for him.
Yeah, so the rumored price was 15 million euros. Which I think probably is about right, maybe a little more than that, but not too much more, is going to be what he goes for. And I do think we're in the end game now for Eric Bailly. I do think he'll be sold by the club this summer. He's not going to be able to agree a contract that gives him the playing time that he wants, and he'll be leaving. It's an open question where he goes, but I do think we're set for his last maybe 3 or 4 appearances before he leaves.
I can't see really a top club with sense going for Eric Bailly, because if you look at his injury record, it's not really a sensible signing to make, because he's really talented. His physical attributes are really, really impressive, but he just can't stay fit. And, that's been the whole story of his entire time at United, really. It's been really consistent on that front. So honestly, I don't
Tottenham
see
need a
the top
defender.
club.
You could see him going back to, or going to one of the Milan clubs, or going back to Villarreal, especially if we choose to go for Pau Torres as our center back, someone who I really like in case Varane isn't available. If we go for someone like that, then you could definitely see him as a part swap, kind of maybe. I think Torres is valued around 45-50 million pounds, so maybe something like 30 plus Bailly or something like that could be a viable solution for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So United Dynamo FC, would you sort of use the same sort of defensive back five as what United Resurgent and the others pretty much mentioned?
Yeah, and then the same midfield pivot as well. You have to have the energy to match Leeds if you want to get a result against them.
Yeah, so you'd play McTominay and Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. They definitely
we had the same back five and the same midfield pivot too as well the last time around. So
the front four is where it gets interesting.
Exactly, and so no reason why we shouldn't change that.
No. So Vim, what sort of front four would you pick then? I mean, Dan James played really well last time. Would you pick him again?
Yeah. Obviously, I initially had Rashford in my lineup, but obviously after hearing all his presser, where he didn't train today, he still looks a bit doubtful. And even if he trains tomorrow, like the surgeon said, I don't think we should play him unless absolutely necessary. Given we have Roma and then Liverpool and then Roma again, so we've got that sort of a week, and so you want to keep him as fit as possible for those 3 games in particular. So I would rest Rashford. I've got Dan James starting on the left. He was really good last time around against Leeds. And just his work rate, his speed, his energy, I think it'll be absolutely critical against this team. And obviously Bruno Fernandes in the number 10. Mason Greenwood on the right for me. And then Edison Cavani up top.
Would you pick the same front four, Dan?
Yeah. I actually, before this, I was thinking about it, and I actually put Pogba on the left, but then I remembered how well Dan James played last time and how good he is as a defensive, sort of helping the defense. He played really well against Leeds last time. I think he actually scored a goal, if I remember rightly. But yeah, I'd definitely play Dan James. And I mean, if it's not working out, then put Pogba on the left. I've been loving Pogba on the left recently. But aside from that, my front four is the same.
Yes, you would rest Pogba then, because I mean he's just had a week off, so I don't know. I would consider playing.
It's not so much. It's not resting Pogba. It's playing players to their strengths, and I think Dan James would be really, really good in this game. And I think all the rest that you can sort of give Pogba is good, really, because I mean he is prone to picking up injuries. He's missed quite a few games, and I think he's going to be crucial against Roma in the week. So it's not about resting him. That's just an added bonus to sort of giving Dan James game time, playing to the strengths of the team, and then also taking into account the strengths of Leeds as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Pogba on the left or the right works against certain teams, as we've seen in the past, but Leeds don't seem to be one of them, simply because they're one of those teams that play with aggressive intensity throughout. You see their work rate is impressive, and I just feel that Pogba won't be able to cope up with it, which is the same reason why he wasn't picked the last time around, and same reason why he doesn't get picked. That is not for me to say that he is in great form. Obviously he's in great form and he's very important to us, but I just feel in this game, tactically speaking, he may not fit our setup. And yeah, he'll definitely work against someone like Roma or Liverpool for sure. But just that against Leeds,
I think Pogba's been playing so well on the left is because he's been getting the freedom that he needs. At Juventus, there was a motion that he played best in the midfield left of a midfield 3, and he's been playing on the left wing recently, and he's been playing so well, but because he's been getting the freedom, he hasn't been having to he hasn't been getting all those sort of defensive duties. He's been able to get forward and create and think in an attacking sense. But in this game particularly, you know, the wingers are going to have to think in a defensive sense, absolutely, and that's why Dan James is the best option for me.
I think there's also, on this subject, while we're talking about Pogba, there's an argument where if you do bench him as a rest, then in the second half, if in the first half we can go all out and then maybe I don't know, say a 2-0 lead in the first half, then Leeds are going to have to push up even more. They'll give more space. Then you can bring Pogba on in the second half to play the balls over the top.
Yeah, bang on. I think that would work really well. So, United Resurgent, your front four?
Well, I think it's a fitting end to the week that broke the football universe that I think you guys are being very harsh, and Paul Pogba should be one of the members of the starting 11 this week. For me, I'm going with Bruno Fernandes at number 10.
What?
I'm going with Paul Pogba on the left.
We have to savor this, ladies and gentlemen, we have to savor this moment because we're starting for the first time, and I can't remember when, is actually praising Paul Pogba and wants him in the starting lineup.
He's been very good recently, and I think actually what Apollo's or what United Dan and UFC just said really plays into this, which is if we have a 2-0 lead at halftime, then you can make substitutions that then take advantage of the space in behind, and that's how I'd look to use Dan James. So for me, I'm thinking Bruno at number 10, Pogba on the left, and then this is where I think it's optimistic of me and highly unlikely, but given the match doesn't particularly matter, I'm going with Ahmad on the right and then Mason Greenwood up top. And the reason for that is we saw in the last match, pre-match, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said that Edinson Cavani had told him he wasn't fit to start. I know he's had a week off since, but he also played 45 minutes last game when he was probably expecting to play more like 20, 30. So I think with the games that are coming up, 2 semifinal legs against Roma and Liverpool, you want to kind of preserve Cavani's energy for those 3 critical matches and then take Leeds a little bit lighter. So for me, you don't play Cavani here. And that puts Greenwood up top, which opens up a space on the right. You could go with Dan James, but my thinking is, you know, Leeds play an attacking style. There will be space in behind. The game doesn't particularly matter. Leeds aren't a particularly physical side, so why not throw Ahmad in and give him a start? So I'm going with Ahmad, Bruno, Pogba, and then Greenwood up front.
Could be a bit of a reward for Greenwood as well, of how well he's been playing recently, sort of trusting him in that sort of position in this game.
Another reason actually why I'm suggesting going with Pogba over Dan James is I think if you go with Ahmad like I want to, and you go with Greenwood up front like I want to, you can't play a third inexperienced member of the front 3, then you can't go with Dan James. It has to be someone experienced, and Paul Pogba obviously is one of the most experienced players in our squad. So I really think if you want to play Ahmad, then the way that you do that is by playing Pogba on the other side, essentially, and so that's what I'd go for.
Yeah, that's quite a debate. I mean, United MFC, would you consider playing Ahmad? Because I don't know whether it's too soon.
Personally, I don't agree. No, I wouldn't play him from the start in this one. I don't have an issue with him coming on in the second half, but no, I wouldn't start him. I'm not convinced this is the game you want to throw someone into against this relentless intensity of Leeds.
Just out of curiosity, then, what would be the game you would throw him in? Because obviously the Europa League at this point with 2 semifinals and a final is not an avenue to give him minutes. It's going to have to come in the Premier League. So
are you talking about a start?
Yeah, start.
Yeah,
so
I think
towards the end of the season, I guess, when there's less pressure. So
you wait for Fulham or Wolves or something like that in the last
something like that, yeah. And also, it's worth remembering that he's not in the situation where, say, Dan James was a year ago, where he struggles against low blocks. And that's technically so good. And so, yeah, I think if you're going to put him up against a team who plays in the low block, that isn't an issue either. He'll be absolutely fine in that. The only question is which specific game you earmark. I don't think he'll have an issue with that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list of fixtures in the league. Well, we've got Villa, Leicester, Wolves, and Fulham. 4 games in the league. So I don't think he plays against Leicester. The only real possibilities where he could start will be against either Fulham, or Wolves really, or both. But so I don't see him starting in the Europa League. Not especially not now that we're in the last four, and then if we go progress to the final, definitely not. And so yeah, that just leaves 2 games where he could probably start.
If we can get the job done in the league in securing our objectives before then I don't think there's much of an argument against why he couldn't start both.
Yeah.
Get the job done first, and then let unleash Ahmad and let him start his development.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's all very much about sort of indoctrination. You know, from a sort of sports psychology sort of sense. You know, you have 2 personality types. You can either be need to avoid failure, or you can be need to achieve. And sort of need to achieve personality types are your Brunos, your people that play with like complete passion, and obviously you need to avoid failure types. People that do things, do very easy things as to not sort of mess up, and with very young players, it's about developing them from need to avoid failure personality types into need to achieve personality types. Because if you don't do that, what happens then is if like say for instance you took Ahmed, right, and you threw him into a Champions League final, is his first start. Okay, what happens is the mind gets so over aroused, and you get so over aroused, and then you drop clowns. Like the perfect example of this was when we played Southampton. And I think that 18-year-old started, and was it within 40? Oh, I can't remember. It was really early in the game. He went into a challenge and he got sent off. Right, that's your perfect example of something called over arousal, right? And that is what happens when you throw these players into big games. I mean, for us, Southampton wasn't a big game, but for this player, Manchester United was a big game. So it's obviously very much about indoctrination, which Ollie's excellent at. It's about developing you need to avoid failure types into you need to achieve types, and that's what it's all about.
Obviously, Dan's the expert on sports psychology, so I don't mean to contradict him, but what I will say is the personality type of each player is going to vary. There are some young players that thrive under that kind of pressure. The game that
absolutely.
The game that comes to mind for me is when Louis van Gaal showed up at the Emirates with a back 3, including Paddy McNair and Tyler Blackett, and pulled out a 3-1 win. So it is possible to have a fantastic performance. Marcus Rashford making his Premier League debut against Arsenal and also scored a brace. Mason Greenwood had a great debut as well. So, there are certain people who do really well in that kind of pressured environment. And obviously it's up to the manager to see which category he thinks Ahmad falls into.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I very much needed, I meant to make that point, but obviously slipped my mind. Everyone is different. I was just sort of speaking from a development sort of sense, sort of generally. Obviously, your Rashford, your Jude Bellinghams, these are all like born need to achieve type players. But Ahmad coming from another country, as well. I mean, he's quite small for one as well. He definitely doesn't speak a lot of English. It's probably going to force him to that sort of NAF sort of personality type. Anyway, enough of that boring shit. You don't listen to this podcast to listen to academia. Let's move on.
I mean, it's appreciated sometimes to have the psychological angle, because that's also important for analyzing certain players and analyzing their performances. So yeah, thanks for that, Daniel.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't got anything really else to ask you lot, so I don't know if there's any other points you lot have to raise.
I did want to ask, do you think there is room for a Donny van de Beek in this
game? Not personally.
Given the way he plays, right? He does a lot off the ball, drags players out of positions. If you've seen some of the goals that he's involved in, you can see the way he sort of drags defenders away and creates a space for some of the other players like Fernandes or Rashford, Greenwood to sort of go in. Do you think that might be useful against Leeds?
I think it could be a good idea, considering, I don't think, in the next couple of weeks, there's not going to be many opportunities for him to get minutes. Obviously, with this game, and then the Roma game is definitely not going to start because we know it's going to be Bruno. So, I mean, he probably will start Bruno at the weekend, to be honest, because, how we play when we haven't got Bruno.
Yeah.
But,
I wasn't suggesting a start as such, but maybe say something like coming on at like halftime or at the 50th-minute mark.
You could play Don anywhere across the front 4, I think, and get a decent performance out of him. It's obviously not his preferred role, but I think there are positions where you could use him. The issue is For anyone who's thinking, oh, just play Bruno at number 10 and play McTominay or Matic alongside Donny van de Beek. Against Leeds, that's a terrible idea. Against a team who puts in that much work, you definitely want to have the two hardworking midfielders. So you can't play Donny deeper, but any of the front four positions, I think he could put in a shift.
Yeah, with the amount of players they push forward as well, Donny van de Beek just isn't really sound enough defensively. It's not just about how hard he works. He's just not sound enough defensively or positionally, or experienced enough either to sort of deal with Leeds' pressure or Leeds' numbers when they go forward. And I think in terms of starting him at number 10, I don't think he could really do that as well as Bruno Fernandes either, because the way that Leeds play, obviously we've mentioned before that they push a lot of people forward, as I said, and they play really high line. We need someone who can really play those balls in behind. Especially if we're not starting Pogba. I don't think Donny van de Beek will really be able to do that. It's not really his strength. So I don't know about anyone else.
Just a shout out, yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to bring up?
Hashtag Glazers out, but other than that, I think we're ready for predictions.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with.
Oh, Dan's got the shirt. Dan's got the shirt.
Football is for the fans.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 3-2 United. So Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, all right, that 3-2 United.
Vin?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for 4-2 United.
United Dan MUFC.
3-1 United win.
And United Resurgent.
Well, Apollo or United Dan MUFC stole my score line there. I was going to say 3-1 United, but I'll tweak it a little bit and I'll say we'll go with 2-1. Nervy at the end, just very painful, waiting for the full-time whistle.
Okay, a Leeds game is never painful, mate. A Leeds game is never painful.
I do think it's going to be a really good game. Okay, so I think we'll end it there. We pretty much talked about everything. So if you're watching on YouTube, do give us a like and subscribe. Any other platform, give us a follow on there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.